Yes, and poor you, but I guess it could be worse.
Oh my goodness, it could be.
It could definitely be worse. Yes, I have all of these questions about this book because it was fantastic, and it also reminded me, and I think you're gonna like the comparison. It reminded me of like Judy Blume when she would talk about things that were like, are we allowed to be talking about those things? Like, are we, it just sort of made the the book is fantastic. So the book is called Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me, and it's about a lot of things. It is about by the way, I just want to tell you, I specifically stopped reading about 20 pages before the end because I didn't want to give anything away accidentally.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that was my thing, because I really liked it and it really was hitting me very intensely. And so I think I was just trying to figure out if that would be a way to stop myself from being an a-hole.
So interesting, because the ending has I would say the last 40 pages have several little twists in them, or several little shockers in them. People ask me if I wrote certain of the things for shock value. Reviewers, they don't ask me directly, but they say it in the review. The answer is no, it's how the story came to me.
Yes.
But some of the twists at the end were actually very thoughtful, intentional things I did later to have the book say what I really wanted to say. But so I kind of appreciate you doing that, because the end of the book is chock full of some either, I don't want to call them surprises because those sound pleasant, and some of them are not so pleasant, but kind of like, whoa.
It's not a pleasant book. And I say that in the best way possible. I know that sounds weird, but like, it's not an easy to read book.
It's not.
It's very,
and you know what my gut reaction is to that when people say that?
Thank you. It should be thank you.
It's not an easy thing to live when you're a teenager, and I lived it. And I want other teenagers and even women to know that I see them and I feel them, that it isn't easy to live what we so often do to one another. Not because we're horrible people, but because we're just not more skilled people.
Right. So there was a few things. There was one. I'm going to try to do a live video with us. Hold on. I'm determined, damn it.
I'm so glad. You be determined.
Okay. Let's see. We're starting the live video. Hello. I am here interviewing Gae Polisner on her. You got to be shitting me. On the new book, about her new book. It is called Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me. And we are having tech difficulties because that's what happens. But we had just started talking about it. I think one of the cool things about having you on, and one of the reasons I wanted to do it at this time, is that it's Friday at 4:30, and there are a lot of parents probably bored of entertaining their kids. And there are also a lot of kids that I think are interested in finding out more about what it's like to be a writer. Granted, this particular book is of a little bit of an older age, but it's fantastic. And I have a million questions. And one is, how did this story come to you?
So it's actually pretty funny, because it's not the answer that it should be for this story. Where,
what should it be?
So it should be that this is such a personal thing to me, and that that JL, who is my main character in Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me, is by far my most personal, close to me character that I've written. So therefore, the answer should be that the story comes from there. But actually, the story comes because the title came into my head very early on when I first wrote. That's really not working for me on a podcast. Whoever's doing that, that's not working for me. I'm on a podcast and I can't hear.
Yes.
Sorry, this is what happens when all the families are home.
It's really not a problem. We have technical difficulties everywhere. It's fine. Okay, so what was the personal part that should have appealed to you?
So what happened was, when I wrote my first young adult novel called The Pull of Gravity, it came out to very good critical review, but very small readership.
Okay.
which, you know, the book business is what the book business is, and there are a number of reasons for why that happened at the time it came out, lots of different things. But one of the things that I did kind of unwittingly, it wasn't what I was planning to do, was that I built of mice and a theme of mice and men into the Pull of Gravity. So it had this classic piece of literature tied in. And hello.
I'll get to her in a minute. She's a surprise guest. Yeah.
and so because the Pull of Gravity had that of mice and men tie-in, it became a way for me to reach out to teachers and actually get my book that would have otherwise fallen into the ether out into the hands of interested readers. So now I was ready to write a next book, and I had like a joke forming in my head, not a funny joke, but like maybe that's what I'll be. I'll write young adult novels, contemporary novels that always tie in a piece of classic literature. And so that was brewing in my head, and then I literally one morning woke up with the title, like, haha, Jack Kerouac is dead to me. But I had no idea what it meant, but it intrigued me.
Sure.
And
it's
so
nice when that happens. Come up with like half a thought and then a creative behind it. Yeah.
I wrote an entire book around a title, and I started asking myself, what I knew is that there was this girl that hated Jack Kerouac and that he was a focus or a presence in her house. And I started to ask myself why, not thinking there would be a story in there, and then ultimately intrigued me enough that I ran with it.
Can I ask you, the familiar part to you, the part that should appeal to you, is that the mom connection?
What do you mean?
Her mom, JL's mom.
You mean what the story should have been from the first place?
No, you said that wasn't, you said there was a personal connection that should have.
Oh, the girl on girl hate and bullying that
okay.
I objected to. I that was also circulating in my head, was that since I was writing young adult, one of the things that I wanted to write about was how cruel girls can be to one another and how detrimental that cruelty is. And it was kind of like around, I don't know the time exactly, probably later, but I mean, Mean Girls has had a long life, and I've seen the Broadway play, and it's all fun and games. And you know, there's a dark side, but there's also a very, especially with the musical, everybody's singing and everybody's fun and everything gets resolved well.
Yeah, I haven't seen the musical because it doesn't sound like what it's supposed to be, but yes.
But and I love Tina Fey, and I think, you know, it's fabulous, but that is the lighter side of Mean Girls. But the less light side of Mean Girls is that it affects you and your relationships and how you feel about yourself and who you can love and trust in the future for a long, long time. I did not have female friends I trusted until my 40s because of how I was treated by other girls in high school.
I say the same thing, and then all my friends yell at me. I say I don't have a lot of female friends, and then the ones I do have yell at me. So this is my daughter, Alexis.
Hi.
And actually, right before, I want to get back to Jack Kerouac, but so I had Alexis. Well, we've been, you know, we have a lot of things to read, and you were kind enough to send me all your books. So Alexis, actually, can you show her what?
I want to shout out my publisher did some of that too, Wednesday Books. So I sent you some, and I know Wednesday Books did.
It was amazing.
For doing that. Yes, that is this, which is my debut middle grade with my amazingly talented friend, Nora Rowley Baskin. She's the author of, this is her 14th book.
Wow.
And we co-wrote this one. And this is really like this is the opposite of Kerouac. If Kerouac took me years and years and years to get right, this book poured out of our souls and our hearts and our pores very quickly. And then, of course, we went back and did some revision on it. But the story just poured out of us.
Well, I asked Alexis to come in. I thought we would have a chance to talk about Kerouac first. I'll send her out after. But
I love this.
She read it, and she had a few questions or comments or thoughts. And so
but no spoilers if you can avoid.
I mean, no spoilers.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So tell us. So what do you?
Nora will be so excited about this part too. That's awesome.
I know this is a cute surprise.
So how did you come up with the idea of the book?
Okay, so.
Sorry, mommy and daughter think alike.
So the original title of this manuscript in our computer, the way it sold to the publisher, was actually called Finding Joy.
Oh.
And what happened was right after the election, when I was feeling pretty upset and like I didn't know how to get my bearings about me again or feel kind of okay about anything. I was standing in my bathroom mirror and I was looking in the mirror and I was thinking to myself, how do we do this? How do we find joy after something that feels terrible to us, life-changing happens? And when I thought that thought, I thought that would be a good title for a book about a girl named Joy who has had something terrible happen to her, and maybe there's something metaphorical. She's searching for joy, both emotionally but also physically. And so I called my friend Nora and I said, Nora, what do you think of this idea? And she immediately loved it. And then we sat on it for a while because we were working on something else. And then she called me when we finished that and she was like, we have to write Finding Joy. So that's it, again, kind of a title thing, but more conceptual than the Jack Kerouac story, which is that it was really me going like, how do we do this? How do we find joy? And so I wanted to tell that story.
It's interesting. That is how my first book started, with an image in my head. And then obviously not 10 Steps to Finding Happy, but a book that I have yet to find a publisher for, but I had this memory of myself and my best friend in my head, and that's how it started. And it was actually very similar to the intro to Jack Kerouac, where there were, the two of them, and it was almost like a pseudo-sexual, emotional intimacy. And so that was how I started with an image that grew into a title that, of course, was then changed by the agent. But
yeah, I teach online and in-person novel writing classes or creative writing classes, and I talk about how often you really can write an entire story, whether it be a short story or a novel or a memoir, from just a moment. You don't have to know the whole thing. You just have to have a moment that interests you, that kind of doesn't let go of you, and then be willing to ask a ton of questions about it over and over again, and that will lead to story.
Did you have a favorite part?
Well, I liked how at the end, I liked the note at the end.
Okay.
Is that a spoiler alert?
No, as long as you don't say more, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Now, did you like the note at the very, very end, like the last page note?
Yeah, the last page.
Yeah, that's pretty. We're hoping that the book is very poignant, and obviously there's sad things in it, but that it also leaves you feeling hopeful, like something bad happens and we can heal from it, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way at the end?
Yeah, I also felt like I was dying to for another book like this.
Oh, well, that's an awesome thing. Well, I can tell you something. I don't know if it will be exactly like this, but Nora and I did just sell another middle grade book together.
That's
great.
great.
The most amazing editor who totally gets everything we're trying to do with it. And that one's actually poignant, has some deep, important issues in it, but it's also really funny. Really funny. So we're super excited about that. But same deal with Nora writing one of the characters, I'm writing the other characters, and it goes back and forth between the two characters in the story. So it'll take longer than you might wish because the book business is very slow.
Oh God, yes.
But there will be another one. So I'm glad that you are hoping for one. That's great.
So she is in third grade. I had all of your books in front of me, and she chose this one. And it actually wasn't planned. I mean, this part was planned after she picked it to read. But is there another book that is age appropriate that she would like as well, or could perhaps recommend to her friends? The answer could be no. It's okay.
Of my books?
Of yours, of course.
No. Well, I shouldn't say no, because I do have sophisticated third and fourth grade readers of both The Pull of Gravity and The Summer of Letting Go.
Okay.
Those books don't have sexual situations in them. They have some kissing and gentle, introductory stuff, but nothing too off-putting. And it also depends on where the individual child is coming from. So sometimes in New York or the Northeast or the California, the urban areas, people are okay with that. And sometimes I go into classes in Indiana and the 8th graders aren't okay with it. They're like, why is there so much kissing in your books?
Sure.
So it really depends on the individual child. All my books always deal with tough issues. Sometimes they deal with like parental issues, infidelity and stuff. They deal with death sometimes and loss. But both Pull of Gravity and Summer of Letting Go are very sweet, hopeful books, especially Summer of Letting Go, I think is hopeful. So it just more depends on.
So maybe you can try that next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any sort of special message or a special, something really, that, we discussed what the word we discussed what the word poignant meant last night. But was there any special part of the book that really made you happy or sad or?
Without spoilers, because I know what's going to make you sad for sure, right?
Yeah.
So what was the happy?
So I liked one of the clues.
Did you, which is your, it's okay, you can say which was your, do you have a favorite clue?
I like the tree with the whale eye.
Yeah. So do you want to know a little funny story?
Mm-hmm.
That Mr. Carter character is based on a real person, a man named Mr. Carter, Bob Carter. He was not a teacher. He's still alive. He is not a teacher. He's an artist. He's a beautiful artist. And he is a family friend that I knew even when I was little. And when I was little, he would come over to the house and he would do those milkshake handshakes with us. And he would say to us, stop doing that to me. Stop doing it. Why are you doing it? And we would giggle and we'd say, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. And so he's actually a real person that made it into the book, but I made him a teacher instead of an artist because it made sense for the story.
Yeah.
Isn't that cute?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Hey, I have a question for you. Do you have a teacher like Mr. Carter who has been really great for you that you would like to maybe give a shout out? Somebody who's been like a teacher that really you felt helped you and saw you and made your days better when you walked into the classroom?
Well, my teacher now, her name's Miss Gothic. She's really nice, and she helped me get into Discovery.
Well, that's good. Then we gave her a shout out because I know the teachers are all working really hard right now to try to figure out.
We also like the Discovery teacher too.
Yeah, Miss Torres.
Mrs. Torreson is lovely and speaks to each child where they're at and understands that they each learn differently. And I think that's really huge.
Yeah, good teachers are huge. They really are. And you remember them forever.
Yeah.
And it's been a real treat for me at this age to reconnect with some of my teachers from when I was your age, my 4th grade teacher on Facebook, and be able to tell her how much to this day the way she treated me changed who I am and made me able to write these books and all of that. So that's pretty cool.
That's really wonderful. Thank you, my love. Can you say thank you?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you read. Thanks for reading for us.
Go. Close the door. Thank you.
That was the best.
But the thing is, I prepped her. I was like, just come up with a few questions. And then, of course, she opens her mouth and says the same thing I did, which is sort of funny. I was like,
awesome.
No. I didn't ask her which questions, but she read it in like a day. And so one of the things we've been doing a lot of is reading. And so we're all taking advantage. And I was glad we managed to get her not to give any spoilers because, I don't want any spoilers for you. But also, I specifically wanted her not in the room for Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me, more because of the sexual than because of anything else. I have a question. So we described the main character's mother as suffering from dissociative disorder. I'm a shrink, and I couldn't figure out what we were talking about. So tell me what, where that. Which doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means that everything's changing rapidly every day, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Clearly she's,
I actually think I agree with that. Okay. I think that so much of mental health and mental illness, whichever side of the coin you're on with that, is is we're not always sure what stuff is. And I've certainly had that experience directly in my extended family where diagnoses are coming down, treatments are coming down, things aren't working. They think it's one thing, then they think it's another. So to some extent, we're at a weird time in publishing where everybody thinks everything can be labeled and identified. And then not only that, people think there's a way to get it right and get it wrong. And I'm not sure what they're looking at, but I do a lot of research and have had a lot of my own personal exposure, and that is not my experience. My experience is stuff doesn't often fit into categories.
Yeah.
People struggle to put names on things when maybe it is and maybe it isn't, not unlike COVID right now, when something is new or different or whatever. My first experience with sort of freeing myself up, regardless of what the outside noise might be saying about it, was that in the memory of things, not my main character, which is a boy, but the second main character, which is a girl, it has had an episode of transient global amnesia.
Okay.
And I had a friend who had that happen. And they don't know anything sometimes.
Right.
And so I was like, somebody's going to tell me I wrote it wrong. Somebody's going to tell me, but I'm doing the research and I watched it happen. And you can say all you want, yes or no, but I wrote it the way I saw it unfold. And so much like that with the mom, I gave it a name that her doctor was calling it, but I don't think anybody in this story knows what's going on with the mom.
Right. I mean,
the doctor.
And that's not unusual. You know, I mean, I had a patient come to me. So right now, dissociative disorder or dissociative identity disorder is what we're calling multiple personality disorder, because I guess we feel it's more politically correct, but don't even get me started on political correctness. And, I also had a patient that came to me with the dissociative identity disorder who, it turned out she has Asperger's, or now I have to call it high functioning autism, but she was not, and did not, you know, the problem was she had been her first hospitalization was over the 18, and so they wouldn't diagnose her with what was then a developmental issue. So these are the little nuances. If, you know, I pick a diagnosis that I feel more or less fits for an insurance company, but that is not how it, right. 100%. I will willingly admit that, even if they kick me off all insurance companies,
because that's what you need to do. And so, yeah, so for me, and there have been times where I have actually on 2 different occasions had lovely people on Twitter reach out to me and say, I'm so excited that there's finally a book about a character with dissociative disorder. And I've said 2 different things to them. Number one, be careful, because this is not a book about JL's mom. It's a book about JL.
yes.
So everything you're looking at in this book is from a teen perspective. And if you know anything about teens, it's that they only know what they know,
right,
that's going on with them through their lens.
Yeah.
Partly because of their brain development, and partly because parents, if they're at all skilled, work hard to hide some of the harder stuff from their kids because it's not their stuff to deal with.
Yeah.
So, or whatever, you know, so there are all these different reasons. But so I'd say, number one, just be clear. If you want a book that's all about mental health and the main character is dealing with mental health, go read Inside of Stars and you can judge whether I've done a good job or a bad job from your perspective on that one. But that's a book about mental health. To me, Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me is about a girl who is dealing with parents who are unable or unwilling to parent.
100%.
Moment.
100%. Listen, she and the mom strikes me as a multitude of things too, and I wouldn't know what to. It would take me a while to figure out. You know, she's overly sexual. She's, you know, it's maybe she's borderline. Maybe she's this. Maybe it doesn't matter. It's that what comes across is, like I asked because I was curious if you had anything specific in mind. But in fact,
you did.
Yeah, but you and I seem to have the same. We seem to put the same place on labels, you know, the same importance or lack thereof, as the case may be. You know, I'm a huge, I work a lot with suicidal teens, and I'm a huge advocate in destigmatizing mental health and helping to prevent, you know, teen suicide. And twice in the last however many months, I've come across, I've hit a wall where people
have conversations.
Like
if only
life in the quarantine.
if only these were small children I was speaking to and not 22 and 24-year-olds. But
yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. That's why I gave up and called mine in. I was like, I planned for it, but
well, and I actually moved out of the spot. This isn't the spot where I normally do this from. I moved out of the central part of the house so I could be in a little more off the beaten path spot. But
that's like when I close the door and lock it so I can go to the bathroom. It's almost like a flashing sign, So I really felt like, right. So I ran into, I blocked. So I ran into two things while I was doing this. And I ran into, or while I was trying to promote mental health awareness, suicide. One is I heard from one of the people who runs the Long Island American Suicide Prevention, blah, 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 who explained to me that we in the mental health department do not use the word stigma because the very thought of it conjures up a negative image. And I kind of almost lost my shit because I also looked her up and realized that this woman has dedicated a large part of her life to serve, this community and others, which is fantastic, but is not a mental health provider. And also I think we're all in the suicide prevention world together. And for someone to point out something so small seemed a little bit belittling, because at the time I was seeing suicidality in 6 days a week, and I felt like you missed the point.
Well, I think that's it too. We're missing the point, and also what groups of people are feeling is either acceptable or appropriate or the best language for things is rapidly changing constantly, and that's okay. And I believe if that is the case, then we need to give people credit for trying.
Yes.
For
yes.
their intention
yes.
behind it. But if you have stuff that is rapidly expanding and changing and people are disagreeing and it's taking a while for it to play out as to what really is acceptable and not acceptable, okay. So then let's all work together to keep making it better. But that doesn't mean we have to kind of go off into a fit of outrage. You're a horrible person if you haven't caught up to whatever their particular thing is in the moment, because I see so often on the flip side that nobody is caught up on other things that might be my particular thing. So there's a lot of that kind of flailing and anger when instead we could just all say, great, let's keep doing our best. Let's keep making it better. Let's keep reshaping it until we all get on the same page. And I feel like that would alienate less people and make people more anxious to do better.
Right. And also let's look for intent, I had on a separate note, there was a mother that reached out to me and her child had killed themselves. And I use the term committed suicide because that is how I was trained. And that is in a sense what it is. But the mother had a point that brought up committed as a crime. And the fact is there are still some places that technically suicide is a crime. And yet as a mom myself, I certainly understand where this woman is coming from. And I told her I would have to give it some honest thought and think about it and figure out how to change how to find some middle ground, because my heart goes out to her.
Yeah. And it's a possibly very good point that we should all give thought to and see if there's a better way. I actually have a similar thing in Jack Kerouac that we corrected between the ARC and the hardcover, because I saw.
Yeah, I have the ARC, so now I'm really curious. Yeah.
So I'm not sure we were able to do it in all the places, but I know there were a couple of particular places where we chose it. I saw, I don't remember where, some people having a conversation about the terminology losing one's virginity, losing our virginity.
Interesting.
And if it's something that we don't have our own, autonomy over our choice, that it's a loss of something that we're losing. And I thought, wow, that's a really kind of interesting discussion, how we call it and how we portray it. I gave it away, I lost it, versus I made a choice to have sex.
Right. It's true.
And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So there were actually some places where I went to my amazing editor, Vicki Lame, and I said, hey, Vicki, maybe this is an opportunity. Let's tweak it a little bit. I'm not sure we can do it everywhere because, as you know, there are a lot of references to whether JL will sleep with Max or not, whether she's going to wait till she's 16 or not, and all of this stuff. But there were places where it actually felt good and empowering to say, hey, I have a chance to go in there and not use language that maybe isn't the best language anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is really interesting. Now I'm gonna have to pay special attention, you know.
Right?
It is. It's funny. It's a weird relationship that Aubrey and JL have. I promise I will not give anything away, but it is very much like many female relationships are. Gets to that point of like weird pseudo-sexual experimentation, and then you can see twinges of jealousy, and then at some point it's are we growing apart, are we growing together, how do boys play a part? I have this theory that I am working on, and I guess I'll now have to publish it quickly, that we should not use the terms best friends anymore, particularly when it comes, I don't mean like ever, but I mean like when it comes to, my daughter is very into, you know, she's had the same best friend since they were like 2. Like, her friend couldn't talk. I think Alexis spoke for her, but Alexis wasn't very good at walking. And so, you know, like I feel like they sort of, and once in a while something will happen, or like this year they're not in the same class. And a couple of times Alexis started telling me about her best friend, some girl whose name I'd never heard before. And so I was like, hold on a second. Why does there have to be one? Why does it have to be a contest? And so, in fact, women are more likely to engage in a covert, I don't know if you know this, but women are more likely to engage in a covert aggression. My husband happened to write his dissertation on women and female aggression, so I have the inside scoop. Whereas like a man will like say fuck you or punch you in the face, or like, and then it's like, okay, call it a day, we're moving on. Girls are subtle and rumor spreaders and steal boyfriends and do all these other things. And there is a environmental-esque anthropological basis for this, for good or for bad. But I still wonder if on some level, when we talk about best friends with our children, we're not, I mean, in particular girls, we're not encouraging some sort of some sort of a competition rather than a more open friendship.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and really worth food for thought. And like, even one of the thoughts in my head is a picture book on that subject. Edit that out so nobody else does it, because that would be a really interesting story to start telling young, which is that we have good friends, we have friends who are kind, or friends who do good things in the world, or whatever it might be. But I think you're right. I think that concept, and then when you don't have that, you are missing a limb. There's something wrong with you. I thought I would actually take a second for people who are listening to maybe just try to give them a tiny framework for the book as we're talking about all of this. So Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me is about my editor's tagline, which I thought was a really good kind of summary of it, is it's a story of a teenage girl who is ready for more, but maybe not as ready as she thinks. But really it's a story about a girl who has been deserted emotionally or otherwise by the people she counts on the most, her mother, her father, and her best friend Aubrey from when they were little. And because this desertion has been taking place over a period of time, she finds herself attracted to and falling in with this older boy named Max. And Max is on the exterior a rough, maybe, stereotypical in some way, bad boy, rides a dirt bike, doesn't do well in school, etc. but his mother was a teacher and an educator, and he reads and he loves books and he loves poetry. And so JL is able to see both sides of him, and she's very drawn to him. And in some ways, although Max is 19 and wants to have sex with her and pressures her even when he's trying his damnedest not to, he's kind of constantly exerting pressure on her, he is also the only one who is there for her.
Yeah.
And so she has, that's what she's juggling in this story is eventually Max wants to hit the road because he's 19 and he's graduating, and he wants to take 15, almost 16-year-old JL with him. And that's the framework for the story of Jack Kerouac is Dead to You. So as we're talking about it, I probably should have done that earlier, but it gives you a little bit more sense of where the different players.
We were all busy trying to make Facebook Live work, and then I totally ghettoed it, and I just turned I just turned my phone towards the screen. I had it on me a little, now it's on you, and just so people can be exposed to both Jack Kerouac and your other books, because obviously I think you're an amazing writer, and I'm very excited to hear how this ends. And I am very sorry that you, like me, got screwed by Corona. But I have a feeling you will come out better than I will, because I'm a first time me on my own, and you fortunately have a support system behind you. But please know that I am supporting you too, because these books are incredible.
Thank you. And even with those big publishers, I mean, there's sort of an unfortunate or an it is what it is hierarchy, and I fall in the, I don't write big dystopian fantasy New York Times bestsellers. I write quiet, literary, contemporary stories, slice of life moments. So,
but they're also very controversial, or can be viewed as controversial, and and I think that's what makes them interesting and probably less. Listen, and nowhere in any of those dystopian, movie, I meant books, but whatever, models, whatever, where there are these, there's some real sexual feelings experienced by a 15-year-old. And it's like I said at the beginning, this sort of reminded me of Judy Blume when it came out, and we were like, what is she talking about?
I wanted to say that I did get a couple in early reviews. I did get a couple of those Judy Blume references, and of course they made me deliriously honored and happy. But I do also want to say that is one of the other things I wanted to do with this is I've read a lot of YA, and when the sex finally takes place in a lot of the YA, between the sex or the foreplay or what the experimentation takes place, it's always like more awkward than they wished it would be, or uncomfortable, or they don't want it but they're doing it anyway, or there's the Twilight, it's, goddess thing, not teen. I actually wanted to, I didn't want to shy away from the fact that it can be awkward, and we can be partly not ready for it, and it can feel good and be tremendously exciting and magical. And even at this age, looking back on it, I can remember some of the experiences I had, and I remember them fondly. I remember them as being like, wow, you never get to feel that way again. That was pretty exciting and fun. And
I agree with you, although the book may have crossed into fantasy at the ability of a 19-year-old to easily give an orgasm. But yes, that was just a joke. I'm sorry.
Or I was going to say, it's
fantasy fulfilled.
Or it's easy to forget how. Now I hope my 22 and 20.
I was just going to say.
Or you can forget how easy it is when chemistry is flowing to feel electrified, like how.
Yeah, this is true. I was just thinking about it, and I was like, this kid really knows how. I don't know. But
Max knows what he's doing.
Oh, I know, which makes me a little suspicious of Max. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to find out more about her dad. That is my my thought process, and it's interesting. The adults are all very like nebulous in their knowledge.
Again, that's partly. Again, the adults are nebulous because I believe that my looking back on my parents as a teen, which is all we can ever go by, is our personal experience on these things, was so flawed I thought I knew what was going on. I thought I knew what they were feeling. I thought I knew things that were happening that weren't even close to happening. So you're seeing her only ever seeing her parents through her lens.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to hear about the ending for you. I'm getting some people who call it neatly wrapped up, and to me, it is so not neatly wrapped up that shocks me, because I mean, I will tell you, I don't resolve a lot.
I don't think, you know, I think you don't want to neatly wrapped up sounds like predictable. And I don't imagine that that's where this is going.
Well, but oddly, I've had a few readers say that it was, and I'm like, wow, I don't know what story you're reading, and you can never control that because we come to the stories with whatever we come to. But I'd be fascinated to know what they're reading because it's so not what I wrote. So
I'm very excited. I hope everyone else is very excited too.
What are you up to? Are you past the Mean Girls scene?
No, I haven't gotten there yet. I am on, Mom just said for one of the 80th time. Oh, they're about to go to prom. The limo just got there for prom.
Oh, so you're like at least 40 pages.
Yeah, but I can't listen. If I get to like the last 20 pages of a book, it's getting finished.
Yeah.
So like this was a purposeful stopping.
No, it was a good stop, but you're not at there's a point where for me, and again, here's another thing about how readers read versus how you feel about it. For me, my last 30 pages or so are the most breathtaking writing I've done. I'm sorry. I'd love to say breathtaking. Boy, talk about like sounding like I'm complimenting.
I was okay with it actually.
The most breathless writing I've done. I was breathless, and the pages fly like that. I've had some people say that the ending felt rushed for them. To me, I was breathless, like they had to move that fast. It had to explode that way. So again, curious to see, but you're not there. You're at the.
I'll be there by tonight. I guarantee you, we're gonna get off this. And as I'm making hamburgers, I'm gonna, hamburgers, no bread, of course. But I'm excited, and it also makes me think about, that book that I never found a publisher for. I wonder if part of it was I had the misconception that things had to be neatly wrapped up, and I think that it's a beginner mistake, and I'm okay with it.
That's okay. That's where you go back in. Sometimes the best way to go back into an old manuscript is have been away from it for a while.
True.
To read it with a whole fresh set of eyes, and you might read it and be like, oh my gosh, all of this is crap, but this is not, and this is my story, and this is where I run with it. And actually, Kerouac, that happened to a great extent. When I snuck this manuscript to my editor because I was going to kill it. It was one of my manuscripts that was floating around that my agent had liked an early version, but then he had given me 6 pages of notes of things that weren't working with it. An early beta reader, my friend Kelly Hager now, but she wasn't a friend back then. She was just a blogger back then, had read it, and she had loved an early version, and I didn't. I couldn't find the soul of it, the heart of it. And I said to my editor at the time, I said, just take a look at it and we'll kill it if you don't think it has anything there. And she was like, Gae, I love JL and I love Max and Aubrey and the characters, but you've written the beginning of a book. You haven't written the end of this story at all. And she was the one who made me think, oh my gosh, now I know what to do with it. So you'd be surprised where in the process that can happen.
It's funny, maybe this coronavirus, maybe that'll be the plus side to it. So Gae, thank you so much for your time. Can you tell people where we can find you and follow you? Obviously the books are available.
Yeah, so the books are available everywhere. Books are sold, as they say. I have a personal plea that if people are able to order rather than through the big behemoth of Amazon that they order, there's a new online bookseller, works just like Amazon as far as I can tell. It's called bookshop.org.
Interesting. Bookshop.org. Okay.
And they actually donate to independent bookstores with every single purchase of a book.
That's fantastic.
So amazing. So if you can order through, they're great. Kerouac actually exclusively came out on Audible until July, and then it will be available on other audiobook formats. But if you are into audiobooks, that you have to do through Audible. I've listened to the first few chapters, and I think the narrator is doing a tremendous job with her. Her voice is not quite as sweet and forlorn as I imagine JL to be, but it's not an easy book to read aloud, and I'm really enjoying her narration. So you can get, if you have an independent bookseller that is, doing curbside delivery,
Yes.
and you can keep them in business, do it that way, of course. As for finding me, I have a Facebook author page that is just Gae Polisner Author, and I interact with educators and readers there. I'm on Instagram at Gaepol, Gaepol. I'm also on Twitter at Gaepol, and I have a website.
Thank you so much. And now I gotta go read the end of the book soon.
Thank